Today's guest is Kerry Baldwin, co-founder of Vita Nova Academy, a micro high school that launched earlier this year in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Vita Nova is a community of entrepreneurial high schoolers focused on mastering core competencies through Socratic practice and passion-driven education. Kerry Baldwin, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kerry. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. We've known each other for many years through the Liberty ecosystem, and it's just
Yep.
thrilling to have you on the show to talk about your new venture as a Microschool founder. And I'm just so excited to get into all of this. But maybe you could start with a little bit of background about you, Kerry, and kind of um, give us a little glimpse of who you are and your professional background, and then we'll get into your kind of entrepreneurial story.
Sure. This is really interesting because I was born and raised in New Mexico, and I was actually my parents helped get legalized homeschooling in the state of New Mexico. So I spent
Wow.
yeah I spent many field trip up at the state legislature, but we were technically homeschooled before it was legal. So I like to say that my education was born from civil disobedience. That hasn't stopped. At any rate, but I was never actually trained as a teacher. My background is as a medical lab tech in the US Air Force. Eventually got a degree in philosophy. I homeschooled my own kids, and actually developed an online course teaching critical thinking skills using the Socratic method back in 2020. And that was for both high schoolers and adults. And so I had been doing that for quite a while. In addition to that, I'm an independent researcher, published co-author. I've got my own podcast, my own website. So I've done a lot of things with this.
I love that. And so, what led you to think about starting a microschool? You mentioned that you homeschooled your own kids. Was it kind of from that experience as a homeschooling parent that you started thinking about microschooling? Was it the kind of boom in education entrepreneurship and alternatives to conventional schooling that we've seen over the past few years? A combination of all of that? Where did this come from?
I really thought of myself as an education entrepreneur with my online courses, and a local group of kids who were actually working with another school or going to school at another school locally. Their mother got wind of my course, because both of our kids were attending that school at the same time. And she wanted me to teach the course to that group of high schoolers. And so she hired me with permission from that other school. She hired me to give my course. And that turned into a temporary job with them, which allowed me to really develop out this idea of taking critical thinking and using it as a pedagogy, as a means of learning, which has always been my particular bent. I don't teach debate, for example. I tell my students you can't debate what you don't know. So we use the Socratic method as a means of discovery. And so I started developing this out actually as a pedagogy, and you know, all of these alternative forms of education are sort of born out of disagreements with people and what do we think is better and improvements with the system. And it just so happened that the parents and families that I was working with at the school really saw an improvement in just a period of 5 months working with them. Everything from their reading comprehension to their writing skills to their public speaking skills. These were all the things that were being affected just by teaching them critical thinking. Um, and there ended up being a disagreement over whether that school wanted to implement my methods. The families decided that they actually wanted to keep them. And so we broke off and created Vita Nova so that the kids could continue doing that. And actually it was that whole experience was really led by the students. The students themselves had really felt a difference in their education and their progress, and they wanted to keep going with it. So that's how Vita Nova was born.
Just amazing. And Vita Nova was born just a few months ago, in the
Yep.
spring of 2025, so kind of mid-academic year. What was that like, sort of starting in at an off time period?
Yeah, I would say, it certainly wasn't ideal, but necessity is the mother of invention. And that really was the case with the students.
Yeah.
Um, they had they had really gone from just kind of going with the flow of a model to really digging into what is it that they want, learning to become independent thinkers, connecting their education to their own thinking and what they wanted. And we are actually, our mascot is the phoenix because we were born through a trial of fire. And so we carry on that metaphor through the whole thing, just emphasizing that, hey, you know what, difficult things happen in life, and that's actually normal. And that's the greatest learning opportunity. And so, even though it wasn't the ideal situation, it was certainly a learning opportunity.
Right. I just also want to say, as an aside, that you practice what you preach. You are an expert debater. You were several years ago in a debate with the Soho Forum against Walter
Mm-hmm.
Block. So this, comes from a place of experience and knowledge and sort of the power of debate, critical thinking,
Yeah.
Socratic discussion. Okay, so you opened is it Vita Nova? Yeah,
Yep.
Vita Nova Academy in March of 2025 with 8 students,
Mm-hmm.
some of whom graduated already
Yep.
last spring. So you already have a successful track record of sending graduates out into the world. And one of the things that you mentioned to me before we clicked record is that you're running this micro high school, as a state recognized private school, a nonprofit private school, not as a homeschool program, the way a lot of micro schools today are running. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about why you made that decision. Was it based on kind of state and local regulations or preferences of families and founders? What was the thought process around structure?
Well, I think, there's a few things. Number one, because I homeschooled my own kids, because I was raised in the homeschooling community to a degree, I did end up going to a parochial school and ultimately graduating from public school when I was growing up. But, so I've spent, and this was all in New Mexico. So I've spent sort of the gamut of education here in New Mexico, and I see what the alternatives actually are. And I think coming from the homeschooling community, I'm a huge advocate of homeschooling. So whatever critique comes out is not like to speak against that in any sort of way, but the homeschooling community here really is geared much more towards Christian homeschoolers, Christian religious freedom. I am a Christian, but we want to emphasize that education isn't tied to religious belief. It's not tied to political belief, which is often the case when people start homeschooling. Education is really about learning how to think. And when you get down to the crux of the problems in the state of New Mexico in particular, where ranked 51st in a nation of 50 states, if you include DC, in education. We used to compete with Mississippi for last place, but Mississippi learned how to teach reading comprehension properly, and so they've skyrocketed. But if you look at the basic skills that kids need, reading comprehension, writing, literacy, mathematics, these are actually all tied to thinking. And that's not reserved for people of any particular political persuasion or religious expression. We want to really emphasize this is for everybody. This is what it means to live in a free society. In fact, we have an honor code that is based on academic freedom, so that we can emphasize that, and emphasize the fact that these are skills for everyone, and we want to legitimize that. There's still a lot of people who believe that homeschooling isn't a legitimate means of education. I obviously disagree with that, but we're in the milieu that we are.
Mm.
And the other facet of that, particularly in the state of New Mexico, is that many alternative schools tend to be charter schools. And we want to specifically be a private school because there's still a great deal of freedom, educational freedom for private schools in New Mexico. In fact, I would say we have more freedom as a private school than even the homeschoolers have.
Hmm.
Um,
In what
and we,
way? Can you describe?
um, there are very few regulations for homeschoolers in New Mexico. You have to notify and you have to promise to cover all subject areas. For private schools, you don't even have to make those promises. Although we cover those things, we cover them in a much different way. So, for example, I don't necessarily cover biology, chemistry, and physics. We cover natural sciences, social sciences, formal sciences, and applied sciences.
Hmm.
Um, and so that just opens up the door for what kids can actually pursue. Applied sciences is a perfect place for them to connect their interests in things with the real world and actually see how that is a science. So we have a great deal more flexibility in that regard, and it allows us to use we're also a member school of the Mastery Transcript Consortium.
Yes,
Um,
I was going to prompt you to talk a little bit about that. I love what they're doing.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this because we're not the first school to attempt it, but we are the first school to actually have graduates based on the transcript and are sending them out. So, being a private school, one, it legitimizes us in the eyes of New Mexicans. Two, it gives us a chance to receive donations. We want to be able to have scholarships funded for low income students. We are the poorest state in the union. And two, this gives us an opportunity to join with the Mastery Transcript Consortium and have these alternative transcripts that are based on real skill building.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that. And
Mm-hmm.
in whatever way makes sense for you. I'd love to hear more about the curriculum and kind of your approach with Socratic discussion, really at the heart of what you do, and then how is that translated into the Mastery Transcript Consortium? What does it look like in practice for, admissions committees in colleges and universities?
Yeah, so this is the really exciting part. So we focus on skill sets. And so when you look actually at the mastery transcript, what you get is sort of this heat map of the actual skill sets that the students have demonstrated mastery in. And there's a definition that goes along with each one of those. It's a little I can statement, so that one, the students know exactly what they can do, right? A letter grade doesn't do that. A percentage grade doesn't do that. It just says, you were more or less right or wrong, right? This actually gives students, parents, college advisors, you know, a, anybody with an apprenticeship opportunity. It makes for a great resume. It tells people what that student is actually capable of. And so when we do the curriculum, we don't actually teach knowledge sets, we teach skill sets. So I teach the skills of research, which includes things like reading comprehension, um, communication skills, which includes essay writing, but it can include anything from public speaking to presentations. If they wanted to do a podcast episode or a vlog or anything like that, they can. And so when we're teaching these things, they're learning the skill sets and then they're taking those skill sets and applying it to the knowledge set that they actually want to pursue. So all the skill sets are the same, right? You go through stages of reading from inspectional. Do I need to read this book? Is this something that I'm interested in? To analytical. What's the author trying to say to me? What's the evidence that the author is giving? Do I agree with the author? Right. And then getting into syntopical reading, which is actually the doctoral level of reading, where you're taking different ideas from different authors and figuring out how those pull together. So they're learning those skills and then applying them to the knowledge sets that they want to pursue. So we have a student who's very interested in auto mechanics. And so all of his research goes into the applied science of mechanics. He'll go into the history of automobiles, in his case, racing. He's learning mathematics from the perspective of auto mechanics. And then we have another student who's very, very interested in science and STEM and even the philosophy of science. And so he's taking those research skills and applying them over there. And so they're producing the work, they're learning how to pick the topic, research it, pull all that information together, and then they learn how to do peer review. So they're communicating about that either in an essay or a presentation, and then they're all learning peer review. And this allows them to actually apply a lot of these critical thinking skills in a way that isn't divisive. It's all building up, truth seeking. How can you improve this? It's very, just reinforcing the team building aspect of that. And then they're teaching each other at the same time. So that's sort of that's the intellectual side of the curriculum. And then we pull that over to the creative and entrepreneurial side. So, take the auto mechanics, for example. Well, how do you actually turn that into a service for other people? How do you serve the community with that? How does that create mutually beneficial relationships? You can make money off of that. You are serving your neighbor by doing that. And so we're also teaching the economics of it. I'm the only school, as far as I can tell, I'm the only school that is teaching free market economics. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But it's all tying all this together, focusing on the skills. They get to highlight the knowledge that they actually acquire through the skills. And then we put that into the transcript. And the transcript is really interesting because it's a very interactive sort of transcript. You go into the transcript and you can see evidence, whether it's an essay or a video presentation or, images of art that was created or just any sort of evidence attached to their learning experiences. And then which skill sets were they working on or did they master in that process?
And you told me that the students that you launched with last spring, you consider your co-founders, that this is
Mm-hmm.
sort of a group effort, even though you are sort of the primary entrepreneur, a small business owner, but these are your founding students, your founding families. What has that been like for them and for you to kind of be building this together?
Oh, man. I mean, it's been so great. One of the things that I really emphasize with these kids is that it's their education that they need to take ownership of. And we have lots of conversations about what education actually is. And for these students in particular, these students really found that this method was giving them skill sets that they were not being taught before. And not only did it teach them, some of the more traditional ideas of skills that you would get in school, like reading comprehension and writing and public speaking, but it gave them a voice. They were able to say, no, this is what we want for our education. And I think that's vitally important, especially in high school. High school is really the bridge to adulthood. We can't wait until college for students to learn how to become adults. And so we treat our own school as the bridge to adulthood. And so they're coming in as eighth and ninth graders into our school. And, there's a lot more parent influence in their education process up to that point. And now it's a process of learning how to become adults.
Mm.
And so it's been very important to us that they take ownership of that. But not only that, they are the ones closest to the problem being their own education. And they need to learn how to be advocates for themselves. And we want them to do that. And one of the policies that we did establish is that every year that we have a new graduate, that graduate will fill a seat on the board, so that we always have a, fresh alumni who's coming out of the school, going into the real world, trying to apply those skills, and then coming back to us and saying, hey, these are ways that you can improve. So, they're really a boots on the ground way of getting feedback. And that's very, very important to us so that we can always stay up to date with what it is that they need for their education.
Oh, I love that. A lot of the microschool founders that I interview are running K to 6 programs or K to 8 programs, kind of elementary school, maybe middle school. Sometimes they plan on doing an elementary school program and then parents beg them for a middle school, so they expand. But often they are reluctant or, nervous about expanding into high school, let alone starting a micro high school. I guess what would you say to founders who are nervous about scaling up into the high school years or maybe are intrigued by what you've built, but just are a little bit intimidated about that kind
Yeah.
of 9, 10, 11, 12th grades?
Yeah. This what I've learned just in the past year of starting this whole venture is there's a disconnect between parents and families who are searching for high school education for their kids. Obviously, they want the best for their kids. They want to make sure that they're giving them the best opportunity and leaving as many doors open as possible. And then on this side of the equation are the people receiving talented new students, either from high school or college. These are your entrepreneurs, the investors, business owners, all sorts of people in the community who have a vested interest in educated kids coming up and basically in a place to take their place in society. And whenever I talk to people on this side of the equation, they are super excited about the school, about Vita Nova, about what we're doing, about the fact that we're emphasizing critical thinking and a lot of these soft skills. And then when I talk to parents on this side of the equation, this is so different. This is not what I'm used to. Are we sure this is going to get them the best opportunity? Like there's a ton of trepidation on that side of the equation. And so what I've learned, and I've learned a lot of this from the Mastery Transcript Consortium, who has tons and tons of resources on this, is number one, the old way of doing things with like the Carnegie transcript and test scores and things like that, those were originally intended to measure studiousness. How good of a learner was that learner? And what public education has done to that model has turned it from how studious is this person to how good of a test taker is this person, right? What's their memory recall, their short-term memory recall, quite frankly. And that becomes not a good measure of studiousness and education success. And so there's a disconnect even with the colleges. The colleges themselves are looking for better ways of vetting applicants. And so, this transcript really gives them an opportunity to say, hey, now we get to see these skill sets in real time and what they're actually capable of instead of just a number or a letter. And so, when it comes to other founders, other education entrepreneurs who are looking for, do I actually start a high school? I think, yes, number one, absolutely do it, because part of the trepidation on this side of the equation is the fact that high schools aren't moving. They're not innovating. They're not actually being receptive to this side of the equation, the people receiving the talent and really wanting to see something different, because the old way of doing things is we're stuck in a rut and it doesn't help. And so the other thing that I've noticed with parents on this side of the equation is that they want the nostalgia of the traditional high school experience, prom and student government and football games and all of those things. And as somebody with a microschool, what I'm looking for are other microschools to network with,
Mhm.
so that we can actually create that sort of that feel. We can have our own prom, we can have football games, we can do those sorts of things if we actually start growing, but we can't until you have other micro high schools, for
Right.
example.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And I think we are starting to see these network effects take shape, particularly for founders, that you feel more confident venturing into opening a school because other people have gone before you. And certainly families now recognize microschools and similar models as viable alternatives. But I think you're right that having that kind of close-knit geographic network of different microschools in one area to kind of provide these extracurricular enrichment opportunities, it would be the next step to entice
Mm-hmm.
more families to take the leap encourage more students to consider these options more seriously.
Yeah.
And it does sound to me like you're saying that Mastery Transcript Consortium could be a really excellent partner for microschool founders who are in the high school years. Do you have a sense of what it would take for a microschool high school founder to connect with them, and what is involved from your perspective as a founder?
It's really super easy. They have, so there's a fee every year that you pay. It's not very bad. I don't remember so they'll base the fee based on how many students you actually have. And I think it was like up to 150 students, the fee is 1,500 a year. But what that gets you is one, the transcript. Two, what they do with the transcript is really fascinating because you don't actually go it alone on this. They have one, a ton of resources for learning how to implement it in your school, and even transition if you're on the Carnegie model. But one of the things that they do that I really, really love is they get the kids in. So the kids have their own profiles in here. They have a progress tracker that is all skills based. And then the kids will upload their own college lists to their profile, and the consortium will contact those colleges in advance to say, hey, you're going to have an applicant with a mastery transcript. We want to train your admissions on how to read it. And
Hmm.
so they do that as one of the benefits for being a member school. And what they have are now, I want to say over 800, I think it is. I could have that number wrong, but the website has the correct number. I feel like it's 800 schools, universities, colleges in the United States and some across the world that are now accepting mastery transcript. And even schools like Harvard or Stanford, or, it's everything from state schools to private schools. And so there is a shift, and they've talked to college admissions so that college admissions can say, hey, these are the sorts of things that we're looking for, we need clarity on. And so there's a really active movement with the consortium and working with colleges so that colleges can actually see the quality of student from that transcript. And so parents and students and other microschool founders can really trust it as a legitimate thing.
Amazing. Ah, I love that. So, and I'll put a link to Mastery Transcript Consortium in the show notes as well as to Vita Nova Academy. So, what's next for Vita Nova Academy? Where do you see your micro high school going? How big do you expect to get and still be micro? What does the future hold?
So one of the things that I'm working on right now is actually developing out a curriculum that is Socratic, and that already has a lot of these skills components already built into it, so people don't have to reinvent the wheel. One thing that we had thought about in terms of scaling was, do we want to have one massive Vita Nova Academy, or do we want to have like a franchise of academies, sort of like Acton? And actually, I think we don't want either because
Hmm.
both of those things lock people in and stifle innovation. And we want to, number one, the Socratic method isn't my proprietary thing. um, and but the other thing is that other founders can take this and adapt it to their own strengths, right? My background is in philosophy, but somebody with a background in science or a background in arts could take this and create a micro high school that is more geared towards the arts or more geared towards STEM.
Hmm.
And so, what we want to do actually is create a curriculum that is licensed with a Creative Commons license.
Hmm.
So it's protected in terms of copyright, but it allows anybody to take that and innovate with it.
Hmm.
And we really want to promote the idea of Socratic learning. It is easily the gold standard in learning. And then we want to network with those schools. We want to be able to say, hey, let's actually work together. If you can specialize in this, I specialize in that. We want to build each other up. We don't want this idea in the marketplace where, there's a problem with some views of the economy that's this zero sum thinking, right? There's only so many slices of the pie to go around. And that I would argue to my dying breath is not true. Competition is something that can build everybody up. It is not a zero sum game. There's more than enough to go around. And we should be supporting one another even as we become, as we specialize in the various areas that we're specializing. So we want to remove the barrier to entry for high school, microschool
Hmm.
founders. And we also want to help them get started and network with us and work with us.
Oh, I love that. So, Kerry, as we wrap up, just some reflections, if you would, on what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Obviously, you've had these entrepreneurial activities throughout your career, but in terms of being a school founder, what is that like for you personally and professionally?
Oh man. Actually it's really interesting. My brother who's helping with a lot of the administrative startup stuff, he and I were laughing just a few months ago. We are like, how did we become school founders? Like this was not on our radar. He's an engineer by trade. And I think back to my dad, my parents, who helped establish homeschooling in New Mexico way back in the 80s. And after my dad died back in 2023, and after he died, I had actually found I assume he read on the floor of the state legislature to then Governor Anaya after the homeschooling law was passed. And his emphasis was really about education freedom and just expanding these opportunities for education, what qualifies as education, and creating a national movement. These were the comments that he was making to Governor Anaya. And so as I think back on that, even though this isn't a home school, it is definitely an outworking of the work that my parents did in advancing education freedom for me and my brothers in terms of homeschooling. And so we're just carrying on that torch.
Yeah, and a national movement. I mean,
Yeah.
homeschooling continues to grow now, in some cases, accelerating
Mm-hmm.
faster than before the pandemic in many states. So that movement is alive and well, and great to hear that your parents were very much the pioneers in that.
Yep.
So, Kerry, if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, learn more about Vita Nova Academy, learn more about this new curriculum that you're offering, what is the best way for them to do that?
So you can visit our website, vitanova.academy. So there's no .com or .org, vitanova.academy. You can also email me directly. I'm on the other side of this email, info@vitanova.academy. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to any one of you.
Well, I have loved talking with you. It's great to see the success that you're having, and I'm looking forward to following your journey. So, Kerry Baldwin, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much, Carrie.